We're back. Chapter 9. I know you were so freaking pumped for this. Me too. Let's get into the saucy parts. And the really crazy parts of the story where, like, the whole time you're like, oh my gosh, I can't put this book down. I'm so excited. Okay. Comfy blankets, garden gummies, whatever you do, hot cup of tea. Let's go. Chapter 9. The following morning, as Alice and the other servant woman prepared my bath, I contemplated my plan. Tamlin had mentioned that he and Lucian had various duties, and aside from running into him in the house yesterday, I'd seen neither of them around. So, locating Lucian alone, first order of business. A casual question tossed in Alice's direction had her revealing that she believed Lucian was on the border patrol today, and he would be at the stables preparing to leave. Hell yeah, go get it. I was halfway through the gardens, hurrying toward the outcropping of buildings I'd spied on the day before, when Tamlin said from behind me, "No tripwires today?" I froze mid-step and looked over my shoulder. He was standing a few feet away. How had he crept up so silently on the gravel? Fairy stealth, no doubt. I willed calm into my veins, my head. I said as politely as I could, "You said it was safe here, so I listened." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he put on what I suppose was his attempt at a pleasant smile. "My morning work was postponed," he said. Indeed, his usual tunic was off. The baldric was gone, and the sleeves of his white shirt had been rolled up to the elbows to reveal tanned forearms corded with muscle. Oh my gosh. Okay, I was already picturing, not Edward, what's the other one? It's Edward and, oh yeah, Jacob from Twilight. Why could I not think of it? That's what I picture him looking like, just hot shit. Taylor Lautner, that's who. If you want to ride across the grounds, if you're interested in your new residence, I can take you, Tamlin said. Again, the effort to be accommodating, even when every word seemed to pain him. Maybe he could eventually be swayed by Lucian. And until then, how much could I get away with if he was going to such lengths to make his people swear not to harm me, to shield me from the treaty? I smiled blandly and said, "I'd prefer to spend today alone, I think, but thank you for the offer." He tensed. "What about—" "No, thank you," I interrupted, marveling a bit at my own audacity. But I had to catch Lucian alone and had to feel him out. He might already be gone. Tamlin clenched his hands into fists, as if fighting against the claws itching to burst out. But he didn't reprimand me. Damn it, wish he would've. Didn't do anything other than prowl back into the house without another word. Soon enough, if I was lucky, Tamlin wouldn't be my problem anymore. I hurried for the stables, tucking away the information. Maybe one day, if I was ever released, if there was an ocean in years between us, I would think back and wonder why he'd bothered. I tried not to look too eager, too out of breath when I finally reached the pretty painted stables. It didn't surprise me that the stable boys all wore horse masks. For them, I felt a shred of pity at what the blight had done. The ridiculous masks they now had to wear until someone could figure out how to undo the magic binding them to their faces. But none of the stable hands even looked at me, either because I wasn't worth it or because they too resented me for the death of Andreas. I didn't blame them. Any attempt at casualness took a stumble when I finally found Lucian astride a black gelding, grinning down at me with two white teeth. I'm telling you, I know he's just smoking freaking hot. "Morning, Feyre." I tried to hide the stiffening in my shoulders, tried to smile a little bit. "Going for a ride or merely reconsidering Tam's offer to live with us?" I tried to recall the words I'd come up with earlier, the words to win him, but he laughed, and not pleasantly. "Come now, I'm to patrol the southern woods today, and I'm curious about the abilities you used to bring down my friend, whether accidental or not. It's been a while since I encountered a human, let alone a Fey killer. Indulge me in a hunt." Perfect! At least that part of this had gone well, even if it sounded as lovely as facing a bear in its den. So I stepped aside to let the stable boy pass. He moved with a fluid smoothness, like all of them here, and didn't look at me either. No indication at all what he thought of having a Fey killer in his stable. But my kind of hunting couldn't be done on horseback. Mine consisted of careful stalking and well-laid traps and snares. I didn't know how to give chase atop a horse. Lucian accepted a quiver of arrows from the returning stable boy with a nod of thanks. Lucian smiled in a way that didn't meet the middle eye or the russet one. No ash arrows today, unfortunately. I clenched my jaw to keep a retort from slipping off my tongue. If he was forbidden from hurting me, I couldn't fathom why he would invite me along. Save to mock me in whatever way he could. Perhaps he was truly that bored. Better for me. So I shrugged, looking as bored as I could. Well, I suppose I'm already dressed for a hunt. Perfect, Lucian said, his metal eye gleaming in the sunlight slanting in through the open stable doors. I prayed Tamlin wouldn't come prowling through them. Yeah, you did. You wanted him to prowl through them. Prayed he wouldn't decide to go for a ride on his own and catch us here. Let's go then, I said, and Lucian motioned for them to prepare a horse. I leaned against a wooden wall as I waited, keeping an eye on the doorway for signs of Tamlin, and offered my own bland replies to Lucian's remarks about the weather. I was soon astride a white mare riding with Lucian through the spring-shrouded woods beyond the gardens. I kept a healthy distance from the fox-masked fairy on the broad path, hoping that eye of his couldn't see through the back of his head. The thought didn't sit well, and I shoved it away, along with the part of me that marveled at the way the sun illuminated the leaves and the clusters of crocuses that grew like flashes of vibrant purple against the brown and green. Those were things that weren't necessary to my plans. Useless details that only blocked out everything else, the shape and the slope of the path, what trees were good for climbing, sounds of nearby water sources. Those things could help me survive if I ever needed to. But, like the rest of the grounds, the forest was utterly empty. No sign of fairies, nor any high fae wandering around. Just as well. Well, you certainly have the quiet part of hunting down, Lucian said, falling back to the ride beside me. Good. Let him come to me. Rather, me seeming too eager and too friendly. I adjusted the weight of the quiver strap across my chest, then ran a finger along the smooth curve of the yew bow in my lap. The bow was larger than the one I used at home, the arrows heavier and heads thicker. I would probably miss whatever target I found until I just adjusted to the weight and the balance of the bow. 5 years ago, I'd taken the very last of my father's coppers from our former fortune to purchase my own bow and arrows. I had since allotted a small sum every month for arrows and replacement strings. Well, Lucian pressed, no game good enough for you to slaughter? We've passed plenty of squirrels and birds. The canopy above cast shadows upon his fox mask, light and dark and gleaming metal. You seem to have enough food on your table that I don't need to add to it. Especially when there's always plenty left over. I doubted squirrel would be good enough for their table. Probably not. Lucian snorted, but didn't say anything else as we passed beneath a flowering lilac, its purple cones drooping low enough to graze my cheek like cool, velvety fingers. The sweet, crisp scent lingered in my nose even as we rode on. Not useful, I told myself. Although, the thick brush beyond it would be a good hiding spot if I needed one. You said you were an emissary for Tamlin? I ventured. Do emissaries usually patrol the grounds? A casual, disinterested question, of course. Lucian clicked his tongue. I'm Tamlin's emissary for formal uses, but this was Andreas's shift. So someone needed to fill in, and it's an honor to do it. I swallowed hard. Andreas had a place here, and friends here. He hadn't been just some nameless, faceless fairy. No doubt he was more missed than I was. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I didn't know what he meant to all of you. Lucien shrugged. Tamlin said as much, which was no doubt why he brought you here. Or maybe you look so pathetic in those rags that he took pity on you. Bastard. I wouldn't have joined you if I'd known you used this ride as an excuse to insult me. Alice had mentioned that Lucien could use someone who snapped back at him. Easy enough. Lucien smirked. Apologies, Feyre. I might have called him a liar for that apology had I not known he couldn't lie, which made the apology sincere. I couldn't sort it out. So, he said, when are you going to start trying to persuade me to beseech Tamlin to find a way to free you from the treaty's rules? Oh shit, he's on. I tried not to jolt. What? That's why you agreed to come out here, isn't it? Why you wound up at the stables exactly as I was leaving? He shot me a sideways glance with that russet eye of his. Honestly, I'm impressed. And flattered. You think that I have that kind of sway with Tamlin. I wouldn't reveal my hand, not yet. What are you talking about? He cocked his head. His cocked head was answer enough. He chuckled and said, before you waste one of your precious few human breaths, let me explain two things to you. One, if I had my way, you'd be gone. So, it wouldn't take much convincing on your part. Two, I can't have my way because there is no alternative to what the treaty demands. There's no extra loophole, but there has to be something. I admire your balls, Feyre. I really do. Or maybe it's stupidity, but since Tam won't gut you, which was my first choice, you're stuck here, and unless you want to rough it on your own in Prythian, which he looked me up and down, I'd advise against. No, I couldn't just stay here forever until I died. Maybe there was some other way, or someone else who could find a way out. I mastered my uneven breathing, shoving away the panic, bleeding thoughts. A valiant effort, Lucien said with a smirk. I didn't bother hiding the glare I cut in his direction. We rode on in silence, and aside from a few birds and squirrels, I saw nothing, heard nothing unusual. After a few minutes, I quieted my righteous thoughts enough to say, where's the rest of Tamlin's court? They all fled this blight on magic? How do you know about the court? He asked so quickly that I realized he thought I meant something else. I kept my face blank. Do normal estates have emissaries and servants chatter? Isn't that why you made them wear bird masks to the party? Lucien scowled, that scar stretching. We each chose what to wear that night to honor Tamlin's shape-shifting gifts, the servants too. But now, if we had had the choice, we'd peel them off with our bare hands. He said, tugging on his own, and it didn't move. Why haven't the magic to make it that way? Lucien let out a harsh laugh. Something was sent from the shitholes of hell, he said, and then glanced around and swore. I shouldn't have said that. If word got back to her, who? The color had leached from his sun-kissed skin. He dragged a hand through his hair. Never mind. The less you know, the better. Tam might not find it troublesome to tell you about the blight, but I wouldn't put it past a human to sell the information to the highest bidder. I bristled. But the few bits of information he'd released lay before me like glittering jewels. A her who scared Lucien enough to make him worry, to make him afraid of someone might be listening, spying, monitoring his behavior. Even out here, I studied the shadows between the trees but found nothing. Prythian was ruled by 7 High Lords. Perhaps this she was who governed this territory. If not a High Lord, then a High Lady, if that was even possible. How old are you? I asked, hoping he'd keep divulging some more useful information. It was better than knowing nothing. Old, he said. He scanned the brush, but I had a feeling his darting eyes weren't looking for game. His shoulders were too tense. Oh, shit's about to go down. Okay. Prepare yourselves, listeners. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't remember. What sort of powers do you have? Can you shapeshift like Tamlin? He sighed, looking skyward before he studied me warily, that metal eye narrowing with the unnerving focus. Trying to figure out my weaknesses so you can... I glowered at him. Fine. No, I can't shapeshift. Only Tam can. But your friend. He appeared as a wolf, unless that was his... No. Andreas was high fae too. Tam can shift us into other shapes if need be. He saves it for his sentries only, though. When Andreas went across the wall, Tam changed him into a wolf so he wouldn't be spotted as a fairy. Though his size was probably indication enough. Plot thickens. A shudder went down my spine, violent enough that I didn't acknowledge the red-hot glare Lucian lobbed my way. I didn't have the nerve to ask if Tamlin could change me into another shape. Anyway, Lucian went on, the High Fae don't have specific powers the way the lesser fairies do. I don't have a natural-born affinity, if that's what you're asking. I don't clean everything in sight, or lure mortals to a watery death, or grant you answers to whatever questions you might have if you trap me. We just exist to rule. I turned in the other direction so he couldn't see as I rolled my eyes. I suppose if I were one of you, I'd be one of the fairies, not High Fae. A lesser fairy like Alice waiting on you hand and foot? He didn't reply, which amounted to a yes. With that arrogance, no wonder Lucian found my presence as a replacement for his friend to be abhorrent. And since he would probably loathe me forever, since he'd ended my scheming before it had even began, I asked, how'd you get that scar? I didn't keep my mouth shut when I should have and was punished for it. Tamlin did that to you? Cauldron, no. He wasn't there, but he got me the replacement afterwards. More answers that weren't answers. And I would have been punching the freaking wall. So there are fairies who will actually answer any question if you trap them. Maybe they know how to free me from the treaty's terms. Yes, he said tightly, cereal. But they're old and wicked and not worth the danger of going out to find them. And if you're stupid enough to keep looking so intrigued, I'm going to become rather suspicious and tell Tam to put you under house arrest. Though, I suppose you would deserve it if you were indeed stupid enough to seek one out. Oh, we know she's going to seek out a cereal. We just know. They had to lurk nearby then if he was this concerned. Lucian whipped his head to the right, listening, his eye whirling softly. The hair on my neck stood, and I had my bow drawn in a heartbeat, pointing in the direction Lucian was staring. He whispered, his voice low and low. Damn, bow down, human, and look straight ahead. I did as he said, the hair on my arms rising as something rustled in the brush. Lucian said, forcing his gaze ahead to the metal eye going still and silent. No matter what you feel or see, do not react. Don't look, just stare straight ahead. I started trembling, gripping the reins in my sweaty hands. I might have wondered if this was some kind of horrible joke, but Lucian's face had gone very, very pale. Horses' ears flattened against their heads, but they continued walking as if they'd also understood Lucian's command, and then I felt it. Oh my gosh, we're on chapter 10. Should we keep going? Yeah, you're right, we should, because it's getting too damn good to stop. Alright, chapter 10. My blood froze as a creeping, leeching, cold lurched by. I couldn't see anything, just a vague shimmering in the corner of my vision, but my horse stiffened beneath me. I willed my face into blankness. Even the balmy spring woods seemed to recoil, to wither, and to freeze. The cold thing whispered past, circling. I could see nothing, but I could feel it, and in the back of my mind, an ancient, hollow voice whispered, "Flesh." To swallow, but my throat closed up. On trees, on anything, mass circling us again and again. I wanted to look. I needed to see what it was. I stared at the coarse trunk of the distant elm, thinking of pleasant things like hot bread and full bellies. A starry, unclouded night sky, peaceful and glittering, an endless summer sunrise, a refreshing bath in a forest pool, meetings with Isaac, losing myself for an hour or two in his body and our shared breaths. It was all around us. So cold that my teeth started chattering. I stared and stared at that ever-nearing tree trunk, not daring to blink. My eyes strained, filling with tears, I let them fall, refusing to acknowledge the thing that looked around us. Look at me! And just as I thought I would give in, my eyes hurt so much from not looking, the cold disappeared into the brush, leaving a trail of still, recoiling plants behind it. Only after Lucian exhaled and our horses shook their heads and did I dare sag in my seat. Even the crocuses seemed to straighten again. What was that? I asked, brushing the tears from my face. Lucian's face was still, you don't want to know. Please, what is that? Is that the cereal you mentioned? Lucian's russet eye was dark as he answered hoarsely. No, it was a creature that should not be in these lands. We call it the bog. You cannot hunt it and you cannot kill it, even with your beloved ash arrows. Oh shit. Why can't I look at it? Because when you look at it, when you acknowledge it, then it becomes real. That's when it can kill you. A shiver spider walked down my spine. This was the Prithian I'd expected. The creatures that made humans speak of them in hushed tones even now. The reason I hadn't hesitated, not for a heartbeat, when I'd considered the possibility of that wolf being a fairy, I heard its voice in my head. It told me to look. Lucian rolled his shoulders. Well, thank the cauldron that you didn't. Cleaning up that mess would have ruined the rest of my day. He gave me a wan smile. I didn't even return it. I still heard the bog's voice whispering between the leaves, calling to me. After an hour of meandering through the trees, hardly speaking to each other, I'd stopped trembling enough to turn to him. So, you're old, I said, and you carry around a sword and go on border patrol. Did you fight in the war? Fine. Perhaps I hadn't quite let go of my curiosity about his eye. She is obsessed. He winced. Shit, Feyre, I'm not that old. Are you a warrior, though? Would you be able to kill me if it ever came to that? Lucian huffed a laugh. Not as good as Tam, but I know how to handle my weapons. He could handle my weapon. He patted the hilt of his sword. Would you like me to teach you how to wield a blade, or do you already know how, O mighty mortal huntress? If you took down Andreas, you probably don't need to learn anything. Only where to aim, right? He tapped on his chest. I don't know how to use a sword. I only know how to hunt. Same thing, isn't it? For me, it's different. Lucian fell silent, considering. I suppose you humans are such hateful cowards that you would have wet yourself, curled up, and waited to die if you'd known beyond a doubt what Andreas truly was. Insufferable. Lucian sighed as he looked me over. Do you ever stop being so serious and dull? Do you ever stop being such a prick? I snapped back. Dead. Really, truly. I should have been dead for that. But Lucian grinned at me. Much better. Alice, it seemed, had not been wrong. Whatever tentative truce we built that afternoon vanished at the dinner table. Oh, snap. It's going. Tamlin was lounging in his usual seat, a long claw out encircling his goblet. It passed on the lip as soon as I entered. Lucian on my heels, his green eyes pinned me to the spot. Right. I'd brushed him off that morning, claiming I wanted to be alone. He is jealous. I love being jealous of me. Like, but not in a weird way. We all love them. Anywho, I heard... Oh, sorry. Tamlin slowly looked at Lucian, whose face had turned grave. We went on a hunt, Lucian said. I heard, Tamlin said roughly, glancing between us as we took our seats. And did you have fun? Slowly his claw sank back into his flesh. Lucian didn't answer, leaving it to me. Coward. I cleared my throat. Sort of, I said. Did you catch anything? Every word was clipped out. No. Lucian gave me a pointed cough, as if urging me to say more. But I had nothing to say. Tamlin stared at me for a long moment, then dug into his food, not at all that interested in talking to me either. Then Lucian quietly said, Tamlin looked up, more animal than Fey in those green eyes. A demand for whatever it was Lucian had to say. Lucian's throat bogged. The bog was in the forest today. The fork in Tamlin's hand folded in on itself. He said with lethal calm, You ran into it? Lucian nodded. It moved past but came close. It must have snuck through the border. Metal groaned as Tamlin's claws punched out, obliterating the fork. He rose to his feet with a powerful, brutal movement. I tried not to tremble at the contained fury, at how his canines seemed to lengthen as he said, Where in the forest? Lucian told him. Tamlin threw a glance in my direction before stalking out of the room and shutting the door behind him with unnerving gentleness. Lucian loosed a breath, pushed away his half-eaten food, and rubbed his temples. Where is he going? I asked, staring toward the door. To hunt the bog. You said it couldn't be killed, but that you can't face it. Tam can. Of course he can, that hog. My breath caught a bit. The gruff high fae half-heartedly flattering me was capable of killing a thing like the bog, and yet he'd served me himself the first night, offered me life rather than death. I'd known he was lethal, that he was a warrior of sorts, but... So we went to hunt the bog where we were earlier today? Lucian shrugged. If he's going to pick up a trail, it would be there. He's so sarcastic, I love it. I had no idea how anyone could face that immortal horror, but it wasn't my problem. And just because Lucian wasn't going to eat anymore didn't mean I wouldn't. Lucian, lost in thought, didn't even notice the feast die down. I returned to my room, and awake, with nothing else to do, began monitoring the garden beyond for any signs of Tamlin's return. He didn't come back. I sharpened the knife I'd hidden away on a bit of stone I'd taken from the garden. An hour passed, and still, Tamlin didn't return. Oh, she's missing Boo. She's missing Faye. I'd miss him too. The moon showed her face, casting the garden below in silver and shadow. Ridiculous, utterly ridiculous, to watch for his return to see if he could indeed survive against the bog. She's crushing, fam. She's crushing. I turned from the window, about to drag myself into bed, but something moved out in the garden. I lunged for the curtain beside the window, not wanting to be caught, waiting for him, and peered out. Not Tamlin, but someone lurked by the hedges, facing the house, looking toward me. Male, hunched, and the breath went out of me as the fairy hobbled closer, just 2 steps into the light leaking from the house. Not a fairy, but a man. It was my father. We're on chapter 11. I know. You're like, damn, it's getting good. How did your dad get there? What in the world's going on? This is so great. This is so magical. Bet. All right. Tune into the next episode. Let's see who or what or how this garden episode goes down. Toodles.